I wanted to thank you for coming. I'm a believer that poetry comes into existence in the listener's ear. So if you weren't here, there would be no poetry. So I'm just going to hand the microphone over to Mary Gilliland. And again, thank you for being here.
I'm going to chance this. And I want to thank Jerry especially because he's really the only one where when he asks, I say, yes, I'll be playing in the band. And I'm happy to be playing in the band tonight. It's the night after what certain people in Ithaca, like my husband, call Grateful Dead night, which was May 8th, 1977. And we walked out of Barton Hall and put our tongues out to get the snowflakes. I'm going to start with a poem in honor of our Irish weather. And this is called Ballinskelligs, which is a place where I spent almost a year ago exactly. I was flying back from Shannon. Ballinskelligs. Call it lace, the privilege, a ride to the top of hills allowing lambs and the one bird, one egg kind of nest. A beach stone handed through upon alighting. Dark blue, yet bright, the morning sea blinks its constant horizontal against an unseen rock face far below. So often materialism blunts the sense. The point of an oratory is its window. Shoulder to shoulder, beneath the water's surface, countless foamy pistons pulse, rise to the sheet of glass that does not break. And we mentioned city lights, where I would hang out sometimes when I lived in California. And yesterday, I had a phone conversation with a very dear old friend and Dharma teacher, Gary Snyder. It was his 95th birthday. Wow. And I'm going to read this poem that I wrote for Gary and his family. It's called Old Growth. Look where it's steep or swampy. Look in every gorge that feeds a great lake. An old tree trunk might have sinuosity or a twisted, gnarled crown. You might look for cavities or swellings, old scars on bark deeply furrowed or worn to a startling smoothness. Through the crises and risks, resilience, tight relationships, you'll find ginseng, grape fern, moonwort on the understory floor. And do support Buffalo Street Books. They have my books for sale right at that place called The Counter over there. And I'm going to read from two of them tonight. The newest one is In the Pool of the Sea's Shoulder. It was inspired by the life of an activist in New Mexico who ensured that LGBT got into the state's hate crimes law just after the turn of this century, and also by our nuclear age and many of the events and icons thereof. So I'm going to read parts that have to do with water from this. It's a long poem, and it's actually 1/3 of the entire long poem manuscript. And there are multi voices in it. There's 6 main characters. There's a chorus, and there's a choir, and there's a couple of minor characters. And so I'm going to read mostly about the 2 men who were in the book, and a description of a statue that was made in Fukushima, Japan, and happens to reside down the road at the Arnott Museum in Elmira. Alberto, who schooled my brother in breaks from work, immense drives, warm soaks, hoja calientes healing pools on the long loop home from Chimayo's healing earth or Chaco's sacred air. I can see the lantern gleaming on its abdomen on the lower screen of the front door, red hourglass on jet black coin. Al slipped off a loafer, smashed the spider, let us in for our rest break from the hospital at the glowing adobe you would not be coming home to. Gorgeous jewelry growing dusty in Alberto's studio, amethysts and rubies, silver, gold. With what beauty Freddie, this is the main male character, Freddie is being addressed, a radium girl would paint the numbers on a glowing watch or clock face, then slide the tiny brush to a point between her lips to paint another. You abandoned that research, as hard to read about as the agonizing death after a few short years of well-paid for a girl work, was that she had been certified unharmed year after year by a man called the company doctor who had no MD. Right. Al had found some peace in that last year, though loneliness, it's freer knowing that you are waiting for nothing. So he said he'd taken up yoga again, the sutras this time with the postures. Al spent a lot of time walking by the river, stopping to sit with the old fisherman who was always there as the new year began. The roll of the water, the roil of the water, the postural restoration of water, the runes of water, the trance of water, the wily glance of the water. Okay. I'm not going to go on to the statue. There's actually a picture of the statue inside the book too. But the nice thing about the statue is the chorus in the book are the little statuettes of sea creatures that are on this immense metalwork. So I just want to read two poems that are a little more fun from Ember Days. Ember Days also came out last year. Okay, Newbie. I'm waiting for the bus, sat on indelible back, the last straw of alfalfa tickling epiglottis. My nylon raincoat, drenched and heavy as a cassock, whirled a shooter marble up against my small one. Serenity rises in the east, but doesn't end at this stop. We are steps away from a fitness center, and you know humans. When we leave someplace for someone, an undetectable viral load persists, committed to memory under the green lindens, the dachshund or the badger, patriot or traitor, a trial or a thrill. I'll end with a brush with contumacy. You all know what contumacy means. I actually have a pocket dictionary in my pocket, but you can look it up, and most of you do know what it means. And it is a word. It is a word for these times. Everyone operate with contumacy. A brush with contumacy. The landscape painter swats the river, distracted by a swarm of gnats clambering the muddy bank. School children balance on the peeling log, lurching, vainly grabbing a zigzag across storm cloud. Momentarily, a migratory blue alights on still damp, opaque white. Molting petals from a spent magnolia wrinkle the sienna backs of mothers lazing by the water. Gone, girl. Where's that steady hand for brushing in the twittering sparrows, hooking sparrow hawk? Thank you. And now the next poet.
We're supposed to introduce ourselves. I'm Howard Nelson. I live in the next county north, Cuba County, a little north of Moravia, the next lake over, Owasco Lake, that way. What's that? I don't know. I gotta look it up after. I got other things to worry about. So I love lakes and streams and waterfalls as much as anybody, but I thought I would read something about a different kind of body of water. I think it's self-explanatory. This is called Riptide. Hawaii, a beach with big surf. Red signs on the beach urging caution. Red lifeguard chairs, but nobody in them. Wonderful roar of big water tumbling down. People out there beyond the breakers, just dots rising and falling in the swells. Looked like fun. I'm a good swimmer. Hey, I was a lifeguard, so I headed out. I dove into and under the breakers, got through them okay, made my way out beyond the thunder. And it was cool out there, treading water, hanging out in the undulations. Odd, I saw none of the others I'd seen from the beach. They were hidden somewhere. After a few minutes, riding the moving water mountains, I started swimming back toward shore. But shore did not get any closer. In fact, it was getting farther away, and my strokes didn't make any difference. And quickly, I felt myself tiring. I was starting to feel concerned, worried, I guess you could call it that, though there's probably a better word for that solitude, that growing awareness that you are not in control of the situation. Then, out of nowhere, a guy on a board came paddling, and he said, "Do you need a lift?" And I said, "I guess I do." So I grabbed onto his board, and he took us in the right direction. And when we got to the place where the water started collapsing into avalanches, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Okay, we're taking this one." I hung on to the board, and we went under. I remember being in some immense underwater room, neither dark nor light. No sense of up or down, just being swirled around in the will of the water. Once I felt sand under my feet, but the sand washed away from under them. To tell the truth, I don't know what happened exactly between there and the shore. But apparently, one way or another, I made it out of the chaos of the breakers, and I was standing in the surf, coughing salt water. I staggered up the beach, exhausted. When I've told people this story, some have said, "Oh, it must have been a guardian angel." If it was, the angel must have been off duty later in the week when two people at that same beach were carried away and were never seen again. My wife and kids met me on the beach. They'd been watching. I was 33. The kids were 10 and 7. Their father could easily have been swept away. And I would have had that one last intense experience and missed all the years between then and now. My wife would have been a young widow. Our younger daughter would not have been born, at least not by me. Maybe some other guy would have been her father. But then, would she be who she is? I don't know. It turned out differently. The riptide didn't take me. And I don't know what happened to the lifeguard with his strong strokes, his prowess, his noticing my head among the rising and falling water. I couldn't turn around and thank him he was gone. I never saw him again. I'm 70, so he's probably in his 60s. I wonder where he's living now. Probably not still a lifeguard. Anyway, this is my way of saying thanks. Many thanks. And so at the other end of the water experience spectrum, this is Hound and Pond. I sit on one shore, and she is on the other. She follows her nose along the interesting edge of the pond, disappearing into the brush and emerging again. She makes sniffing look so appealing, the right way to meet the world. I admire her long, poetic snout, curious and acute, her howls and much silence. I admire her bony grace, crooked, strong legs, and her pace, her energy when running, her peacefulness when sleeping. But now she is only investigating, a casual, important business, checking the news among the mud and grass. And now she wades out so her belly is well down in the water. She laps a drink and loiters there at the heart of a summer day. She is a cool dog in the pond of sensible desire. Thank you.
Neat. Oh. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger Hecht. I want to thank Jerry Mirskin very much for including me in his many bands. There are all sorts of opportunities to play. So the theme, I understand, is water, and I was desperately looking for poems that have water, and so I'm going to look at a couple of new things that have water of one form or another. At least rivers are named, nothing else. Although this one's actually probably the most watery of the bunch. This year is the 200th anniversary of the Erie Canal. And so this is a poem that's going to be part of an anthology on the Erie Canal. It's a cento. All of the lines are from 19th century descriptions of the Erie Canal called I Was Inclined to Be Poetical About the Grand Canal. Sore from the jolting of the stagecoach, I determined to proceed by canal. 3 horses harnessed to our vessel like the steeds of Neptune, exposed to the full fervor of the sun. One looks for the picturesque and finds the profitable, the portion of the cabin destined for the use of the ladies. A slipper dropped, rustling of a gown, unlacing of a pair of stays. My ear seems to have the properties of an eye. Bumping against the sides of a lock between magnificent cliffs, that we may better enjoy the scenery under the penalty of having one's head crushed to atoms. From the canal, nothing is seen to advantage. The horrors of the night and the wet of days, one town consisting of a whiskey store and a warehouse. One sees more Bonapartes than Washingtons as ornaments on the walls. An annoyance of 16 Presbyterian clergymen out early in the misty morning, looking eagerly for signs of Utica, the write-up shops, the streets running into the woods. Gay butterflies seem quite at home in this ravine. A lantern burning at each end of the boat, suffering what with the traveler's lonely feeling, my fancy found another emblem. Traversing the long level, how the poor banished Indians must mourn. And this has a vague reference to a river. the Susquehanna, driving out of Oneonta. Driving out of Oneonta, west toward the sun, already sunk below the hills, not dark enough to be dusk, but getting there. The Susquehanna lies just beyond a short patch of pasture and a future cornfield, barely bigger than a creek at this point. This divided highway makes a much bigger footprint through the floodplain. This divided highway makes a much bigger footprint, though the floodplain is substantially wider. Every dozen years or so, the river reminds us of who owns what. Spring is rushing ahead of itself, the steep foothills rapidly greening, the deft lacework of branches will soon be sewn solid and shut. Snow, a distant memory, we'll brag to our grandkids about. The seasons are so out of whack. In the open space of the empty lanes before me, a bald eagle slowly coasts across the highway toward the mountain, wings stretched flat, eyes level, an effortless low glide. I had to do a double take to catch the white tail feathers to confirm what I'd seen. I know they nest nearby, their presence discreet, a heroic return. Deer were once like that. When I was a kid, deer appearing at the edge of my school's ball field sent everyone to the window, gawking at these ghosts haunting our clean suburban woods. Even the woods were once a rarity, cleared for crops that wouldn't grow and dairy cows that did. All it took was a calamity to resurrect the forests. Depression, capital flight, jobs outsourced to the lowest bidder, and the deer in abundance, and the foxes and the ticks they carry with them all came clamoring back, so confident of themselves, they don't startle when I walk my dog at night. They stand their ground on the neighbor's lawn, watching warily. The eagle owned the air I drove through. I hold the wheel with both hands. I swear it turned its golden eye toward me as it passed, or maybe it just looked ahead. Sadly, there was no way I could take a picture to hold on to that for a while. Land for sale signs along the highway delude us into thinking we can have it all. We're not even renters. Daily, we think we're destroying the earth, and we are, but the earth is just waiting us out, just waiting on a calamity, like the one we all anticipate, like the one that's right around the corner, or that other one, or the one we can't foresee. Who knows what will come clamoring back? This is on, so I'm switching rivers now. I was in the Susquehanna, and now I've mentioned the Thames. But I think this may be on a somewhat lighter note. This is called I Puked on My Way to See the Queen. Yes, the Queen, in her sensible shoes and unflattering hats, having just exited my 13th year in London at last, 1977, the tabloids full of cartoons of bone-and-nosed cannibal Africans parachuting into Britain to crash the Jubilee. Piccadilly, awash with drunk Scots, flipping their kilts, diving headfirst into fountains, poised to outdrink, outfight, outplay the English for the British Cup and win. And punk plastered on buses and tube stations. God save the Queen in hostage note letters pasted across Her Majesty's face. But I had no clue, then still enthralled with the fantasy of a Beatles reunion and still barely getting a grip on Bowie. Angry at my parents for not taking me to the Abbey Road crosswalk, but making me sit through No Sex Please Were British, because PBS taught us that English humor was uniquely funny, and also that England was a uniquely tranquil countryside, but also frightened, having watched a tiny Pakistani street vendor suffer under a torrent of fucking wogs from the scariest mouth I'd ever seen. Over and over, the words exploded like a storm under the first not overcast sky in days. A uniquely London experience, my father said, who fled bombs and Jew-hating cops as fast as the war would let him when he was barely 13. And now we're back, visiting old relatives and old haunts that survived the war. His house in Ilford that wasn't bombed, though a girder blasted from the house next door, crashed its roof and pierced his bed while the family hid in their shelter. And castles and towers and armor and jewels and exquisite tableaus demonstrating King Henry's methods of torture that my brother especially liked. And Big Ben over the reeking Thames, there's your water, and off to see the Queen make her daily peregrination from Windsor to Ascot for the summer races down a long tree-lined drive where tourists and commoners lined up to cheer at royals waving back within the safety of their bulletproof rolls and walk away buzzing with royal experience. So why not, en route, on some overpass to the M4 motorway, besides the dozens of Union Jacks fluttering in the petrol-fumed sky, blow into a conveniently available plastic bag with remarkably little overspill the contents of my guts, because I had just eaten a uniquely British breakfast of eggs and toast and grease and a lot of stuff I was only just beginning to digest. I do have actual water. I have actual local water. So I'll leave with this villanelle about Jennings Pond. The sun sinks past the great beyond, or at least beyond the horizon, and sets aflame the skin of Jennings Pond, a red and molten blue reflection stirred only by the misstep of a heron. The sun sinks, and beyond, deep in the trees, young coyotes hunker till their midnight song sets aflame the skin of Jennings Pond and tears my ears toward that direction our cat unwittingly wandered into teeth and terror and the great beyond that summer night. Their meal, our grief, and so on. The trees turned their heads. Now their leaves turn on and set aflame the skin of Jennings Pond, a red and yellow and rust pointillist explosion that draws us to the jaws of their oblivion, our joy and delight till the sun sinks, the great beyond, and all aflame the skin of Jennings Pond.
Yeah. All right. I didn't give any thought to water. I figured other people would do that, and they did. On the other hand, you can't get away from water. It's just there no matter whether you plan it or focus on it or not. It turns out when I was thinking about it on my walk over here that these two poems I'm going to read are really more about caritas, right? That's compassionate love. It's the thing that Pope Francis and now Pope Leo have been trying to school J.D. Vance in. I suspect they'll be very unsuccessful. The first one's about caritas. The other one is about, what happens when there isn't enough of it. Let's put it that way. And the first poem is actually a retelling of a short story by Anton Chekhov, which I was doing a bunch of many years ago after I was kind of exhausted battling fiction. Chekhov was a great antidote to getting fiction wrong. Fiction right. Anyway, this one's called A Day in the Country. I think I can see better if I take these off, believe it or not. Maybe God's the old cobbler who frees the boy's hand from the knothole he's reached into to steal a cuckoo's egg for his sister. God, that barefoot old drunkard, only his sister can find, searching the village, high and low. He knows to call the storm holy. He knows that rain will end, knows which herb stops a bloody nose. And they tramp the countryside all day. The girl exhausted, the boy taking in the old man's words. How a spray of water makes a swarm of bees settle, that the sparrows a pickpocket, but a nightingale gladdens the heart. God's homeless, like this old cobbler, like this brother and sister. They pass the day amid bird cherry, meadowsweet, and lilies of the valley. A viper crosses the lake, its head rippling the water. They rest on the bank before going on. The old man's no God. The children are sickly, parentless, yet the boy's thoughts are teeming with all he has seen. He is on fire with what he feels as he lies beside his sister in a drafty, deserted barn. No one to tell. When the old man returns from the tavern late that night, he puts bread beneath their sleeping heads. Only the moon sees this through the planking. Only the moon, which doesn't sleep, knows who is and who isn't God. Okay, this is the lack of caritas poem. Ivory-billed woodpeckers play a part. We get our water there. And also the poet Miklos Radnoti, a Hungarian poet who died during the Second World War, Hungarian poet who died, he was in a labor camp, and on a forced march he died and ended up in a common grave, mass grave. He was a slave laborer. But in his, the poem will say, in his pocket they found the notebook with his last poems. Okay, and this one's called Crossing the Line. You're done, they say, when you take out the commas you just put in, dissatisfied with it either way. A simple example of how you never get it right. You never get it right. And probably there is no right to get. There's just that chimera in your mind, flashing past like an ivory-billed woodpecker, last glimpsed in Arkansas's big woods, only a blurred video to show for it. It may not exist any longer. The species, a hurt different from the one, it may not exist any longer, the species, a hurt different from the one you felt on hearing that Alexei Navalny was dead, assassinated, murdered, a word that better expresses the brutal nastiness, the wrong of it. So much should never happen, although a truer way to put it is so much should never be allowed to happen, which is why archival ink awaits and why lignin and acid-free pH-balanced paper should be used to document and preserve in order to say and to continue to say that this act done in cold blood, or this miraculous winged restoration of a bird like the cleaning of the pastel frescoes of the Sistine Chapel, has happened, and that the evidence of it will not blur or degrade or lose legibility over time. Even something as inadequate as this poem that I cannot seem to make other than the groping toward thing it is, belongs for better or for worse to the processes of yellowing and fading and growing brittle until the perfect binding cracks and pages slide out and scattered, unsequenced to blow away. And now this quote is from Radnoti. Oh, if I could believe that everything of value is not only inside me now, wrote Miklos Radnoti, exhumed from the mass grave he was shot into on a forced march of slave laborers in the fall of 1944, a black notebook smudged with dirt in the pocket of his coat. Quote, "These drone plum preserves turn cold. The end of summer bathes in the sun. Fani waits for me." All this could happen. The moon is so round today. Don't walk past me, friend. Yell, and I'll stand up again. There are no right words, only wrong ones to evade. The good Lord bird, spreading wide its wings, keeps its own counsel.
Oh, thank you for mentioning Navalny. Now I'll be depressed for a week.
As you should.
Thank you, Mary, Howard, Roger, and David. And I think we need a GoFundMe bus, and we can travel around, because I think poetry is on the way back, because people in the audience came here without toothpicks to hold their eyes open, and everyone seems kind of awake except for the guy in the corner over there. No, you. But again, thanks for being here. My name is Jerry Mirskin. This is the most fun I ever have. Well, I do break a lot of things too. This is called The Sadness of Water. Has anybody ever been to Dunangus in Inishmore, Ireland? Yeah, tell me about that. There's a fort there, and it has 3 walls. They only need to build 3 walls because the 4th wall was by this cliff. And you go there and you say, I can't believe this. The sadness of water. The ancient ones piled hand-sized stones to build a fort. I recognized what they had done. That was about my speed. I couldn't begin to mine or shape a piece of metal, but I could, given enough time, pile stones. In this case, this fort, this Dun Angus, was backed by a second inner wall. According to the guide, when the outer wall was breached, they were ready. Standing on the parapet, they poured boiling water on the invaders' heads. Remember that? You weren't paying attention. Okay. You'll think twice next time before you try that. And isn't that a piece of work? Human industry at its finest, the fire, the water, not to mention the planning. Those folks were into it. You laugh, but you'd probably do the same. Standing up on the parapet, you'd see them coming. You've been keeping the water hot. Surprise, take that, right on their noggins. Just another day's work in the sticky pocket of time. Those weirdos, they deserved it. Looking back, it feels a little like a fracture, a splice in the design where one sees the bugs. And it's not only the bad behavior, the meanness, it's deeper. It's the uses to which the matter of the world is put. The miracle of fire, the sublimity of water. Is there anything more patient or charitable than water? To think that this ruse is its destiny. I feel sorry for the water, this simple and pure substance that plays a primary role in the whole mojo of life and has a myriad of uses. You can drink it. It can cool or warm you. It grows things. You can travel on it or clean with it. People even use it to bless others. They pour it on their heads. petitioning a little absurdity. I was a little depressed, but not that depressed. After I got divorced, got over that. But I was at the beach with my parents, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to start swimming. You know what I'm talking about. And this is called Not Drowning Waving. I'm taking this title from another poet. Sad and swimming out beyond the first few cuffs of how far they would go, I sense it is my fate to see them walking the shore's steep plank, staring into the sand. Look at how they clutch themselves tight to the bosom, wrapping the bands of their arms like shrunken wings. They took a long patronage, choosing to be parents, not out of existence or the cards, but the swim of the times they were in, the good sidewalks and streets that lead to parenthood. It's odd, but I feel as if I have chosen them. I take them with me as I enter the ocean and swim from shore. My positive strokes say it's possible to leave one's life and begin again. It's not so easy. Not easy to be a parent and take the world as adversary. They keep watch, and I see them recede, though I would know them a mile away for how time has seized their honest bodies. I would like them to be fearless as I swim beyond the small rifts and friendly waves into the deeper culls and darker spirals. I would like them to know. But if I were to wave as they tread the sand, they might not understand. I swim only for expression. How can I, an adult swimmer, enact my fate in the face of such innocence? I should swim back and tell them, tell the downcast eyes, speak to the clutching arms. I got back to shore, my parents were relieved, and I said, I'll just read this one poem. We're having a lot of fun, and then leave a little time if you want to chat with the writers. This one's entitled Italy. Has anybody ever been there? You know what I'm talking about. Where is she? I was with her on this moment. I'm looking for her. Where did she go? Where's my in Emirati? Okay. There we were in Florence and Venice, prancing like immortals in the open brothels of the streets, in the museums and mansions, the palaces and academies of art, my bride and I giving a few pennies to the cobbled cities of spire and dome, the rifts of fashion, the inspirations of piety, a few pennies, a handful of lira, a purse or two. But that was all, for having just stepped into our new life together, we were called to beginnings, more like the simple rock and water of the small towns along the shore. One, I remember, where a woman unself-consciously removed the soft clutter of her clothes and stepped into the sea, avoiding herself being turned to stone for feeling the infinitesimal thrust of existence. And the sea took a step forward and a step back, the slow foot of the sea. And I took a stone for life simple and smooth, for a day the way they make them in Italy, the way Italy says, this is what bread is, and the wine stands on the table, upright and vigilant, and the sun lights the oil like a golden fuse. Isn't that what day wants to be in every precinct, in the forge of every moment, these unsculpted consolations, these shimmerings. Later, I would stow my embers in my check bags and not declare anything. Removing stones from history should be a crime. They have their pure, still lives. But it is understandable. Such things are for those who need an exchange. For each thing, each instance bearing what needs to be known. My traveling companion, with honeymoon eyes, took pictures of the local felines. They were her medallions, meowing of the present, the hungry life. Especially that black wretch who followed me down to the pier where I went to take an early swim, lowering myself into the dark Mediterranean morning. I remember how those two stood by, above the rocks as I swam before the events of day would break the stillness of the sea. Going now that I had everything, to give myself to something larger. Can one go further than the beauty of things, past green morning, beyond blue day, and what would be the exchange? There were a few boats drifting in the water in which I drifted. There is so much poise in a boat, so much charity in clear water. Thank you for coming.